Fallout 4 is absolutely packed with various pieces of helpful but often easily missed loot. Tons of quirky unique weapons, skill-enhancing bobbleheads and magazines, rare materials for building, and lots more. So, in this video, join me on a journey across the wasteland to uncover 25 hidden free gifts in Fallout 4, most of which will be accessible from as soon as you leave Vault 111 and simply require traveling to often obscure locations. So, feel free to background this and follow along whilst you play Fallout 4, and with that, let's dive right in. This first one, or perhaps I should say first two, literally can be picked up as soon as you leave Vault 111. After seeing the sun for the first time in 210 years, the first thing you want to do is run down the hill and back home, avoiding Codsworth by heading around the back of the house and straight into Sean's room, where, knocked under the drawers, we want to pick up the Your Special book, with which we can immediately gain one additional attribute point for any of the special stats. Personally, I'd recommend Charisma for the insane dialogue options it unlocks, but of course, there's good reasons to pick any of these. And bear in mind with this book specifically, it is just unlocking a specific stat direct from the perk tree, and therefore can't scale you past the basic 10 in the way chems and clothing can, say. Also, if you interact with the crib straight away, you'll say this:
"I'm coming, buddy."
But heading out of Sean's room, be sure to also grab our first Grognak comic from the kitchen counter, one of 10 scattered around the Commonwealth, each of which increases our melee and unarmed attacks by 5%. Well worth picking up for when you inevitably run out of ammo. Next up is another secret found in Sanctuary, and is in fact just 2 doors down from our old house. Heading out the door to the next blue one along the streets, and you want to go immediately around the back of this place, where, despite the fact that Vault Tech was literally up the road, Nate and Nora's neighbor, I think called Jahani, decided to construct his own shelter, or root cellar, under the foundations of his house. And it's pretty easy to miss, given the doors are generally obscured by shadow. But inside, amongst a ton of consumables, which are good for keeping heals up earlier in the game, are also 3 gold bars. A rare but crucial crafting material, especially if you plan to mod energy weapons. And despite the fact that, you know, society has long ago been destroyed at this point, gold bars still apparently sell for 450 caps apiece. So it seems if our economic analysis of the wasteland thus far has taught us one thing, it's that gold never changes. Heading out of Sanctuary, and of course the first place most of you will arrive at is the Red Rocket truck stop. And whilst dog meat is unquestionably the best gift you'll ever get in this game, he is by no means hidden. What is hidden around here though is something we can learn about by reading the Red Rocket terminal. In the entry, Safe Storage, where an ex-employee named Jim mentions a cave hidden right below the shop. And indeed, heading out and directly southwest, obscurely tucked away here, is a little den where it seems at some point Red Rocket were even dumping nuclear waste, and today it's a nest of mole rats. But it's also, quite possibly, the most abundant source of brain fungus in the entire game. An item that both heals and irradiates us, but more importantly is a key ingredient for making mentats, alongside Abraxo cleaner, also found in here, and lead. Plus there's a safe and just generally a lot of building material loot. Heading back up to Red Rocket, there should already be a chemistry station here too, so you can start turning that fungus into drugs pretty much immediately. In fact, why not just sack off the whole finding your son entirely and become the Heisenberg of the wasteland?
You're goddamn right.
Heading back up a little to the north though, and a great place not to miss whenever, but especially earlier on, is the robotics disposal ground, resembling more so a car scrapyard at this point, though one that does contain a deactivated sentry bot, which, with a holotape contained in the building nearby, we can reactivate to patrol the grounds forevermore. Or, if we want to profit from this behemoth of death, the holotape itself does have a self-destruct protocol, with the sentry dropping 2 fusion cores upon upon death. There's also a third one in the chest nearby. This is also a great place to pick up a fat man earlier on, hidden amongst some cars just behind the sentry bots, with a mini nuke for ammunition being hidden just next to the eastern entrance gate. By far, the best reason you want to come here though is for the specific magazine Hot Rodder Issue 1, the first in a series of 3, which each grants a unique paint job to all the official and vanilla power armor models. That's T45, T51, T60, and XO1. I've done a whole video on power armor and its unique paint jobs, but if you ask me, the Hot Rodder Issue 1, the Flames paint, is by far the best one that can be applied to all models. With that said, the next Hot Rodder issue, if travelling laterally across the map, isn't bad either, but this one is a little more complicated to find. In an unmarked location called the Milton Parking Garage, found between Fallon's department store and the Milton General Hospital. Once a perfectly normal multi-story car park, until some lunatic thought it would be funny to transform the entire thing into a death trap maze of, well, traps and death. Or, more specifically, ghouls, grenades, and caged rooms that we have to somehow choose between. It's the left one, by the way. But of course, the main prize we're here for comes after navigating all of these dangerous floors. In presumably the bedroom of whoever the hell built this thing is the hot pink Hot Rodder issue, an arguably more striking design, and I just love the idea of the deadliest wanderer in the wasteland roaming from town to town and sowing chaos in this. Especially if we stick with the Nuka World factions say. It just oddly works. Slightly west of that death trap maze though, and if you're in any way a fan of melee weapons, then Jamaica Plain is exactly where you want to go next. A place which, for starters, once cleared, can become a fully fledged settlement for us. But first of all, this place holds some ancient secrets, referred to simply on flyers around the Commonwealth as the treasures of Jamaica Plain, advertised as priceless items which were on display, and said to be sealed up as a time capsule on literally the day that the bombs dropped. But the persistence of the flyers around the Commonwealth has over the years drawn in raiders from all around, who are hoping that priceless pre-war items will still hold value in the wasteland, the same way gold does, I guess. So, getting to Jamaica Plain, there'll be a bunch of dead gunners scattered about, who came here looking for the treasures, which we can find in the basement of Jamaica Plain Town Hall, hidden behind top security, like one of those classic laser corridors, which we can simply go around through a different way by looting the Jamaica Plain Archives key from the body of Ken Standish outside. Or you could meticulously disarm all the lasers for a decent amount of crystal and fiber optics. Finally getting to the vault though, and we'll learn the treasures of Jamaica Plain are for the most part junk items. Many specifically named junk items with lore written about them in the accompanying holotape, but still, items that'll dismantle to make crafting materials. That is all except one. The 2076 World Series baseball bat, which will, with a 6% chance on each hit, send targets absolutely flying. Definitely one of my favourite melee weapons to use, thanks to the spectacular effects, and really, this thing is the real treasure of Jamaica Plain. Sticking around that area though, heading a little west, and the next location, housing a hidden gift for us, is University Point, a once thriving trader settlement which was eventually caught up in a raid of Institute synths after a resident named Jacqueline Spencer discovered an old hard drive with information on fusion reactors. So, desiring the knowledge for humanity's future, the Institute ensured there would be no future for University Point. But there is one treasure that they left behind in Sedgwick Hall. Immediately up the stairs on the left to the top floor on a table here, we can find a Tesla Science magazine, increasing our crit damage with energy weapons by a permanent 5%. And the perfect thing to pair this with is an even more ancient secret just across the street, buried under the Credit Union building. And getting to the bottom of this involves hacking a terminal, just to get inside first of all, then hacking another terminal to open the vaults containing mostly destroyed but but still several locked safes, and the one along this wall can be opened with master lockpicking or simply by the combination found back in Sedgwick Hall. Getting it open will reveal a button, unveiling yet another secret room, which is actually an old pre-war lab, researching into improving energy weapon efficiency before the war. And whilst their research wouldn't be completed by the time the bombs dropped on October 23rd, the scientists, uncertain whether it was safe to leave the bunker initially, opted to just continue their research for as long as their supplies lasted down there. Eventually, having completed that, they would be forced to leave, but as a gesture, they left behind one of their completed prototypes. The lab would never be discovered by the settlers that followed, and as a result, we're now free to take the Limitless Potential prototype, a laser gun that still depletes our fusion cells, but never has to reload. It's an awesome piece of kit with enough lore to back it up that explains its rare special ability. A little west of the Cambridge crater now, just next to the Kendall Hospital, is an unmarked but conspicuous church building, which we'll need to head into for this next one. Inside, we can hear a man being attacked by ghouls and crying out for help. So, of course, running to his aid and dispatching his attackers, the man, or rather actually another ghoul as it turns out, is named Father Gabe, a pastor whom we need to rescue from some zombie-like folk. Of course, this is foremost a reference to The Walking Dead. Father Gabriel comes into that show in much the same way, and remains a persisting main character throughout the later seasons. Our Fallout Father Gabe, however, has no such gratitude for his saviors, immediately then turning and attacking us, needlessly necessitating his own death as well, but at least allowing us to pick up the pastor's vestments clothing item. Not a protective piece really, but one that will grant us an additional 1 charisma and endurance. Though really the main gift here is the little Walking Dead reference. Though there's also a bizarre lore implication to this whole thing. See, feral ghouls don't traditionally attack their own kind, they only attack smoothskins. And Father Gabe, in this case, is also a ghoul, suggesting he must have initiated hostilities with the ferals in the first place for them to retaliate. I mean, if Bethesda wanted their little Walking Dead reference there, you'd think they just wouldn't make this guy a ghoul settler. It'd make more sense. Then again, the fact that he's immediately hostile to us too, his savior, may suggest that Father Gabe has just sustained some kind of induced psychosis. But just how and why is sadly unclear, so discuss your thoughts in the comments. On the theme of churches and holy grounds though, our next item can be found up north in the Wildwood Cemetery. A pretty creepy place as far as Commonwealth locations go, littered with headstones, mausoleums, and a shit ton of ghouls. Seriously, come here at high levels and it's a really fun bit of target practice, but otherwise very easy to get overwhelmed. There's a raider who worships some kind of skull altar that'll also attack us, so be wary of that. And overall, this place seems like the grounds for deeper, more ritualistic activity. But what we're here for though is something a lot more comfortably scientific. Resting on a tree in the center is an entry of the magazine Total Hack, and picking this up will bestow the turret's override program. Admittedly, I hoped this would allow us to walk right up to turrets and hack them individually, but instead, the way this works is by seeking out the turret's controlling terminals at enemy camps. And now, rather than shutting them down, we can instead upload this holotape for several additional options. These include Scramble, which will make the turret target anything and anyone, Override to specifically turn it against our foes, or Sabotage, which will make the thing blow up next time it fires. Now, is it a faff to avoid shooting any turrets until we can find their terminal? Yes, very often it is, but more often than not, it still does serve as useful support or even suppressing fire, so well worth picking up and remembering to use thereafter. Now, aliens have been in Fallout since the first game, and Fallout 3's Mothership Zeta DLC served to expand the lore of that massively, properly introducing the Zetan race, whilst Fallout 4 would then imply humanity was actually born from an alien precursor civilization, talked about heavily in the Cabot House questline. But this doesn't mean Fallout 4 is entirely devoid of the more classic flying saucers, and a few hundred yards west of the Oberlin Station settlement, noticed in amongst some burning trees is a crashed Zetan flying saucer. An awesome unmarked discovery in and of itself, but heading directly north from this, we'll immediately see the entrance to a cave. Inside is the pilot, wounded but still alive, laying next to a skeleton and attempting to use a human radio, probably signaling to its people, of which there are no doubt many more, active on and around the Earth. Unfortunately for this one though, we've discovered its little refuge, and even if we want it to be peaceful, the Zetan won't be. So, easily dispatching this poor, wounded creature, we can pick up the Alien Blaster, a very unique energy weapon that inflicts an absolutely awesome blue burning effect. Now, annoyingly, it of course only takes Alien Blaster rounds, and we're not really sourcing many more of those, but when depleted, we can modify the gun to use fusion cells instead. But if you do want more Alien rounds after this, the only other place to get them in the vanilla game is by completing the Herbologist quest in Nuka World. Now, this next one is technically a free item, save for the fact that there's an exchange of currency, albeit in a unique way. You know all those Overdue books that you can find scattered around the Commonwealth? Well, they're really something you want to be picking up. And to save on the wait, exchanging at your earliest convenience for tokens in a book return terminal. These are found in several buildings around the Commonwealth, including schools, and most obviously, but also importantly, the Boston Public Library, which we can get into by guessing the password.
My ID number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Welcome, Mr. Mayor. Please enjoy your visit.
With our returned tokens then, we can exchange those at the machines for specific prizes. It was basically a pre-war scheme to encourage people to return their library books, but for the most part, these prizes are common items that we don't really need to obtain from here. However, uniquely up for grabs in the Boston Library machine is a copy of Massachusetts Surgical Journal, a magazine which when read will permanently increase our weapon's limb damage by 2%. The only way to get this issue is from this machine, with the only currency it accepts being book tokens. Each Overdue book returns us 5 tokens, so we'll need to collect 10 of those before we can buy this. So essentially, start collecting those books. But since that's technically not a free gift per se, another thing we can find here in the library, tucked away right at the back, is the Intelligence Bobblehead. Walden Pond was once a tourist hotspot, having been inhabited by the author Henry David Thoreau back in the 1800s, who became a popular writer on transcendentalism. Today, it's simply inhabited by a group of raiders, of course, wearing some scary face makeup. These guys have sealed off the entrance to the basement below, so unless we're able to pick the master lock, we'll have to access it from the pond itself, via a sewer pipe. It's not too far south from Sanctuary, this place, and worth visiting earlier on for its 2 unique items. Firstly, on this table, in the sort of entrance pipeway, is Tales of a Junktown jerky vendor, permanently decreasing prices at vendors by 3% for all those things that are neither free nor gifts. And secondly, coming back up to the main entrance, laying on a table here, is the easy-to-miss Big Jim Wrench, a kneecapping device of sorts which grants a 20% chance of crippling a target's leg. A very excellent thing for when we don't want to be rushed by pursuing foes. A really interesting ruin down in the south next, visible from the Warwick Homestead settlement, is the beached shipwreck known as the FMS Northern Star, and it's home to some very unique raiders. Now, these guys will yell at you in Norwegian, saying things like "get off our ship and leave us alone," and the fact that they're ghoulified raiders seems to imply that these are actually the remaining crew of this vessel, who have seemingly lived on it uninterrupted for 200 years. So, whilst labeled as raiders, they may simply be territorial sailors, and kind of suggests we're the bad guy in this situation. But given that along this fortified deck we can pick up another copy of Junktown Jerky Vendor, and then further up, literally balancing right on the end, the Agility Bobblehead, raiding this ship of possible raiders is simply something that has to be done. So, an interesting location to head to all round, but especially so given these easy to obtain free items. Now, hidden away just south of the Hub City Auto Wreckers and west of Lynn Pier Parking, down some steps behind some radioactive barrels, is a little pump house building with a puzzle that we'll have to solve. 4 buttons which, when pressed, will cycle through numbers 1 to 10, evidently to open the door, which will require the correct combination. A combination which, conveniently, has been drawn on the wall literally just behind us. I mean, that kind of defeats the object of the security measure here, but there we go, it works in our favour. Input the code 10451, and inside will be an especially red skeleton, plus a fusion core, plus a standard loot crate, and the item we're here for, the unique revolver, the Gainer. This thing comes ready equipped with a reflex sight and will set targets on fire for 15 additional points of damage, and may even replace Kellogg's pistol for me as my favourite unique 44 Magnum in the game. I mean, maybe, though I'd have to definitively review and rank all of the game's weapons to be sure. Subscribe, by the way, if that's something you want to see, but moving on. Next up, and first off, let me gift you with some pretty useful knowledge that you may not have been aware of. The terminal hacking minigame is a common, albeit time-consuming little puzzle, cross-referencing letters and having to back out and reset the whole thing if we run out of tries. But something truly helpful, which I didn't learn about for ages, is that seeking out any matching open and close brackets on the same line and selecting them will either remove one of the dud passwords, or may even reset our tries to the maximum. Now, using this effectively should make terminal hacking significantly easier, and preventing you ever having to back out again. Additionally, a more tangible thing we can find to help with this in the Wasteland is the Science Bobblehead. Though, unlike most things on this list, it does involve a fair bit of questing to get to. Head up to Vault 75, which was built directly under Walden Middle School, and it'll begin the associated quest. It's a disturbing one, I will warn you, even for Vault Tech, with the Bobblehead in question being found on a desk in the combat test area overlook. And there's also a Grognak comic in here that you'll want to get from the Overseer's bedroom. Famous for its witch trials, the town of Salem is somewhere we can visit up in the northeastern corner of the map. Originally, there was meant to be a questline involving mutated children with magical powers, but sadly that was cut, and Salem became disappointingly lacking in supernatural-themed quests. Of course, we still have the scary-ish Devil's Due, but one more often missed, which requires heading to the back of Salem, is issued by Barney Rook. He'll task us with reactivating his defenses around town to fend off attacking Mirelurks. Effectively, go around and reactivate the turrets via the terminals, and afterwards Barney will thank us with a unique sniper called Reba II. It is the perfect gun for sniping bugs and Mirelurks, dealing a huge 50% additional damage to them. Kinda would have been good to have before heading into Mirelurk-infested Salem, but hey-ho. There's also an issue of guns and bullets in the back room here to increase our critical damage by an additional 5%. In the more northern edge of the glowing sea, another place that we'll have no definitive reason to go to, sits an abandoned shack, housing a huge secret in the depths below. This unassuming little place, you see, was actually a secret surveillance center before the bombs dropped, and was designed specifically for the workers to hold up in the event of total atomic annihilation. Though, the fact that it's just about in the glowing sea means it's so close to where specifically the bombs dropped that very few employees actually made it to the shack and underground in time, with one guy actually getting obliterated simply for briefly heading back out to his car. In addition to that, the employees who did make it were eventually subjected to starvation. Despite the huge budget that must have been needed to dig out this 3-story hole and fix it up with equipment, subsequent budget cuts meant the place wasn't stocked with enough supplies to last, and its location, especially earlier on after the bombings, would have meant the inhabitants soldiers couldn't survive going outside. Even, apparently, with the suit of power armor we can find stashed down here, along with the US Covert Operations Manual for improving our stealth. There's also Institute synths down here, so perhaps once upon a time this K-21B surveillance center was housing more interesting technology, but if so, it's now in the Institute's hands. Now, this one is extremely simple to just go and grab, technically, but you might want to wait until you're a bit more powerful before trying to take on Spectacle Island, one of the largest settlement locations situated just off the south coast, which will require swimming out to the first time. You'll want to bring the Reba II sniper, in fact, because the ensuing fight involves a Mirelurk queen, and just, well, loads of Mirelurks. In fact, I'd recommend coming here in power armor, just to be safe, but that means you'll have to have the patience to spend 5 minutes wading along the bottom of the ocean in a Pirates of the Caribbean style. Anyway, dealing with the Mirelurks and establishing a settlement here is a huge prize in and of itself, and a perfect place to build long conveyor belt production facilities, say. But, more importantly, come to the shipwreck at the southern end of the island, and heading upstairs to the lockers, we can find the Luck Bobbleheads for 1 permanent additional luck and a standout figurine for our Bobblehead display collection. Diamond City is arguably the most civilized location in the Commonwealth, complete with markets, radio hosts, bars, leadership, and of course, a school, which is where we want to head to next. You know, the building with the big yellow bus on top, and inside, just around the corner, on the ground floor, is an issue of the magazine Live and Love, which specifically grants 5% more damage to our robot companions, and is titled I Married a Robot. There's a very specific and foreshadowing reason, in fact, why we can find this magazine in here. Upstairs, we can meet the school's teachers, Mr. Zawicki and his Miss Nanny assistant, Miss Edna. After having a brief conversation with them both, it's clear, despite the form of life discrepancy, that Edna has feelings for Zawicki, and convincing her to talk to him, we can later return to Diamond City to witness a wedding ceremony between man and robot. I think it's best if we don't read too much into it. I mean, Curie at least turns into a synth, but in the case of these two, I mean, she's constantly hovering with the jets of flames. So the next few are going to take us up north to the island of Far Harbor, which itself houses a whole host of additional secrets. The first one is located directly north of the National Park Visitors Center, where, tucked away in a trailer, is a specific suit of unique power armor. Vim was a rival company to Nuka-Cola, which had very similar marketing tactics to the extent that Nuka-Cola began to sabotage their rival. And one such tactic that they both employed was to use iconic suits of T-51 power armor resprayed with a company promoting design. And this green version specifically is the Vim Refresh model, which will grant us an additional point of agility with all parts equipped. Not as good as Nuka-Cola's equivalent, mind you, that buffs agility by 3 and can be found in the Nuka-Cola bottling plants over in that DLC, but sometimes I think it's worth switching these things up anyway, just to appreciate and enjoy the different designs. Located just outside the town of Far Harbor, Beaver Creek Lanes is an old, ruined bowling alley, within which is a tragic but uplifting story about a regular at the club named Thomas Davis, who lost the use of his legs whilst serving in the Navy, which would of course affect his ability to bowl. As a result, his friends got to work figuring out a solution, and eventually landed on a simple but effective idea: to modify the actually kind of rudimentary design of a fat man to instead lob bowling balls. Though, after just some initial trials, it proved far too powerful, literally punching holes through the walls and almost killing people, so was set aside for further testing. Then the bombs dropped and, well, the upliftingness of the story becomes a tragedy again. It does, however, mean that this modified fat man called the Striker is laying about and up for grabs for us. And in fact, the modification for bowling can be applied to any of the fat man weapons is once we find it. It's not tremendously effective, especially when compared to, the classic mini nuke, but the specialized bowling balls can be forever retrieved, as well as easily crafted. And this model, in particular, comes with a 50% chance to cripple a target's leg, slowing or even fully immobilizing them with brilliant effectiveness to render most enemies utterly helpless. Okay, this final entry for Far Harbor is found a ways down in the south, an unmarked quest taking place around Cranberry Island Bog that the game never tells you about. This was inhabited by the Gibbons family, and the journals of Eliza Gibbons can be found scattered about the place, chronicling Eliza's struggles with her family, with the final entry mentioning her attending a party on October 22nd, the night before the bombs would drop, at which point the family would rushingly lock themselves in their homemade bunker, leaving all their necessary supplies on the other side of the island. But switching the 3 generators around here all back to on then, we can open the bunker to find the ghoulified but sadly now feral Gibbons family still inside. They did have hazmat suits, but somehow they'd sustained damage and hadn't protected them from the radiation. Anyway, take out the long past-it family and search a little footlocker down here to grab up the key to the supply shed, which can be found at the southeastern end of the island. Inside here are tons of different crafting supplies, which should prove especially useful in tuning up the various weapons we found throughout the video. Plus, it's also a fun little treasure hunt quest with a lot of story to it, which is all too easy to miss, segmented away in the south of Far Harbor. These final 3 are going to take us over to Nuka World, and first up is a unique weapon that can only be obtained during the main quest, an ambitious plan, and requires pursuing the correct string of dialogue with the leader of the pack, called Mason. Now, be sure to take some grape mentats before this, as there's one persuasion check we'll have to pass at the end. But for the most part, we simply need to pursue the right dialogue, and by that I mean literally the ones on the right, putting the pack in its place and just telling them that we're in charge. Resultantly, provided we pass the final speech check, Mason will conclude that we're both pretty similar, and therefore gift us with the awesome unique gun, the Problem Solver. There's no other way to get this one, we can't kill him and loot it, say. It has to be obtained like this. And it's an awesome gun when it comes to shooting at the same enemy consecutively, because each subsequent hit on an enemy with this will deal 15% more damage than the previous one, and given the rate of fire that the gun has, that can make for some outstanding multipliers. Perfect, in fact, if you just so happen to opt for the open season ending, destroying all the raiders in Nuka World. Go check out my Nuka World endings video for more of an insight into that option. Our penultimate entry is without a doubt the place you want to be in Nuka World. Arguably, in fact, the best location in the entire game, which until you visited it, have you even played Fallout 4? I'm talking, of course, about Wixon's Shovel Museum, a small but also worth it display of some of the world's most famous shovels, including this piece, which was used by Abraham Lincoln's neighbor's cousin to dig a latrine hole back in 1862, and which, according to the plaque, the president himself may have even used. We also have the long-handled spade, which apparently isn't technically a shovel, but also sadly seems to have been destroyed by the bombs, so we can only guess what that one would have looked like. And it's the same case with the bone replica of the very first shovel. Seemingly, they didn't create an asset for that. That was destroyed by the bombs too. Additionally, we can read on the works terminal left in here the goodbye email from an employee who'd had the pleasure, nay, the privilege of working here for 7 years. But alas, after so much time enjoying these important, crucial pieces of history, they decided to broaden their horizons by switching jobs to the Museum of Mops and Buckets. Another riveting sounding place, though one that we're yet to see in the Fallout series, but alas, another good reason to look forward to the release of Fallout 5 in about 20 years. For now, simply enjoy the gift that is this little museum, tucked away at the edge of the Nuka World region. For this last one, we want to head down to the southern edge of the Nuka World map to a little location called Evan's home, where, of course, we can meet Evan, a friendly, kind, and helpful character who explains he's been living out here for years, knows the wasteland can be tough, and, without ulterior motive or reward, simply offers to lend us a hand, gifting us immediately with the recipe for Nuka Love, which he found a while back. A blend of Nuka Cola, which we can then make, that restores hit points by 100 and action points by 300. But back to Evan, and there's a touching but sad story here, involving a Redditor named Nuge47, a Fallout fan who sadly lost his father and brother. Now, according to his Reddit post, he'd made an automatron tribute to his father, and Bethesda was sending a care package to he and his brother as a kind gesture. But before it arrived, his brother Evan also sadly passed away. So, as an additional gesture, to make up for the delayed package, Bethesda also created an NPC of Evan and placed him into Nuka World. And so now, when venturing down here in the DLC, everybody can, I suppose in a way, pay their respects. Ad Victoriam, Evan.
Don't mind me. I'm just gonna hang out around here and enjoy the view. Good luck out there, stranger.
Now, as always, comment below any other hidden free gifts or obscure items you found around Fallout 4 for others to then go and find. And if there are enough of them, then maybe I'll do a follow-up video somewhere. For now, thank you for watching. Huge thanks to the patrons, of course, for keeping the channel alive. And if you'd like to support more content like this, then check that out in the description, where you can also find a link to GOG for a bunch of awesome, often discounted games like the Fallout series and Cyberpunk 2077. I'm Sam Bram, and I hope you have an awesome day.